This is Justice Matters with Tim Buxton, coming to you from Yugambeh country of the Commonberry people of the Gold Coast, Australia. I'm your host, Tim, where my sole aim is to share conversations I get to have with inspiring people doing remarkable work to create a world where we all belong. This podcast is brought to you by the Just Travel Company. Experience, wonder, and unearth justice, and discover the just way to travel today. Visit just-travel.co. Without further ado, here's our guest for this episode of Justice Matters. Well, welcome, Jon. Welcome to all our guests that are Zooming. I feel like because I'm on a video chat with you, I have to say Zooming, which is terrible. But those that are either watching on YouTube or listening on your favourite podcast streaming service, welcome to Justice Matters, and welcome, Jon, to the episode today.
Hey, Tim, and hello out there to everyone listening or watching too.
Yeah. You and I got introduced via, the good old messenger service with a mutual friend, Mike Hardy, who's up here in Queensland. You're down in Sydney, in the guts of Sydney. King's Cross is where a lot of your work happens, but also in the urban areas of Sydney as well. We got introduced. I have spent a day down there, and someone like Mike is someone who I would trust to say, this is a guy you need to catch up with, Tim. I know you get on with him. And sure enough, I really appreciated the last minute invitation to go grab some food and a coffee. And it was just so good just spending an hour or two with you, Jon, down there. And just so proud of, just the work that you are doing, the work that your not only organisation has done, and really look forward to chatting with it. Our audience will be able to listen and chat with you about it. Just quickly, you are the pastor CEO, because it's quite a larger multi-dimensional organisation called Wayside Chapel in the heart of Sydney that really has an incredible heart for those that have fallen by the wayside, the down and outs of society, who I think we'll find are not actually down and out. They have so much to teach us and so much to show us in life. But I'd love for you to just kind of introduce Wayside Chapel, introduce yourself. I'd love to hear your family, your background, and then we'll get kind of stuck into it.
Fantastic. Sounds fun. Oh, you want me to say it? There's a lot of questions in there.
Yeah, sorry. So just give us the intro, whatever you want to share. Mate, go for it. It's better you saying it than me, because I'll probably, butcher it a little bit. But
that's all right. You can butcher away. So, look, I've been in this role for a few years now. I think, like a lot of people I meet, I kind of really stepped into the role, and then the pandemic really descended upon us all. So it only feels like now I'm just beginning. So it's been a few years since I've been the pastor and CEO of this amazing organisation. It didn't certainly begin with me. It began in 1964 when the doors were first thrown open in this neighbourhood, which has got quite a unique history in terms of its relationship to Sydney, but also its relationship to Australia. So it's been many things over many years, and it's had many reputations, and it's depicted often on TV shows. It's it's an eclectic place. It's a beautiful community. It is one that has always had at its heart an acceptance, an approach of non-judgment towards those in our community. It's been a refuge for people who have often been kicked out of their households because of issues regarding their race, gender, or sexuality. And we've kind of ridden those waves. It's right in the heart of the city. It's right near the wharf where the heroin epidemic first kind of broke out in New South Wales as well, when soldiers in the 70s from Vietnam brought all this heroin up the hill, and all of a sudden we had this big drug thing going on. This was the place that was really impacted in the 80s and 90s through the HIV/AIDS crisis as well, and it's always been the nightclub, red light district of the area.
Yeah.
And, Wayside's always found itself in the heart of it. It's an amazing little organisation, and I don't just say that because I'm the boss of it, but we're a small little outfit, but we're well known through the country because of the way we're involved in the work that we do. And so there's some initiatives that have flowed out of this place that are life education that's gone international. And most Aussie kids in primary school would be familiar with a part of the curriculum where they go into the back of a truck and listen to a giraffe talk about drugs. Could there be anything more Australian than that?
Wow.
That's a guy called Healthy.
Yes.
Yeah. Healthy Harold. He started from here, and life education was really a response. Cool. Yeah, it was really a response to, when heroin first hit the streets, no one knew what was going on. All these young people, through that, the 70s and the revolutions that were going on through that time, all of a sudden seeing young people dying with this drug. And so life education was really a way of talking about people's potential. The first classroom, the roof was painted black and it was just dotted with constellations of stars. And, the classes would begin by saying, don't forget that you are made of this stuff and you have so much potential. And so then it would go on to the curriculum around some of the impacts that drug use does have upon you. The freedom rides, which is a pivotal moment in Aboriginal rights in this country, left from the front doorstep here. I'm just looking down to where it was. And that's where a bunch of student activists got on a bus and just drove to some of our outback towns where there was segregation. Many people aren't aware, but the earliest forms of apartheid were based upon the way this country, Australia, was run. And so they just went and they engaged in acts of civil disobedience, which were basically letting little Aboriginal kids go jump into the local swimming pools that were marked whites only. And that was a really important moment for our nation that kind of sowed the seeds that led to the referendum, where prior to the referendum, Aboriginal peoples were not considered citizens. They were considered they were protected under the Flora and Fauna Act. So we have a close relationship there with the Aboriginal community, and also through that time, through the AIDS epidemic and heroin crisis, one of my predecessors, almost once a week was opening the doors to the chapel and picking up a dead body of someone who was just young and full of life and potential, but drugs had taken that away from them. And so as a response of civil disobedience, we started the tolerance room here, which was another act of civil disobedience where I think it opened up 7 times. We were just there to allow people to safely inject heroin with some fresh, clean needles and to have people there to support them in case it was a bad batch. So that was shut down, open 7 days. The pastor was arrested 7 times and released until the Premier of the state, Bob Carr, at the time rang him up and said, if you promise to not open up tomorrow, I promise to put it on the agenda for the drug summit that he was calling. And that led to the medically supervised injecting centre. Until 2 years ago, it was the only one in the Southern Hemisphere, and it was created by a special act of Parliament. So, we've got a really, it's such a beautiful place where the whole thing about us, though, is that we weren't designed from the university down. We are led from the gutter up. So we don't get involved in causes.
Yeah, I love that.
We meet people. And so we see what's emerging, and we really feel like the impacts of society and the truth about a society is always heard from the edges. And it's important for us to attune our hearts and our voices in there. And we've also got a beautiful, unique philosophy where we don't try and fix people. One of the core parts of our philosophy is no one's a problem to be solved, they're a person to be met. And if someone walks away from here feeling met rather than worked on, we know it's been a good day. That's really important because the Western world has a way of constituting us as lonely. And, I was reading a Guardian article the other day where a radical move in Northern Europe has occurred where they've started putting people back on the checkouts in supermarkets. How clever have we become? We've become so disconnected. And I think the lockdown has kind of shown us
Outsourcing
that.
everything.
Absolutely. We became at least that wonderful, all of my cultural references are from the 90s, so you'll have to bear with me. I think it is the greatest decade in human history. But, it was kind of a reverse version of the Matrix. At least in the Matrix, when we discovered what was going on, we were little batteries that produced energy into the system. But we became this kind of reverse Matrix where we were these little units of consumption where we just sat alone in our apartments and houses, and things just turned up at our door. And we realised, oh, my goodness, if I dropped off the perch tomorrow, who would know? Would anyone notice? And
right,
got us into that place of kind of despair and disconnection, and then the anxiety of just re-engaging with society that many people are still experiencing. I spoke to someone just yesterday who went into the supermarket for the first time in 2 years. And I just think, just think about that for a second. They were terrified of walking in through the doors, and yet that was how we used to be connected with each other, and that's how, as communities, we used to engage with each other so we would know what's going on in each other's lives, and now we lead these kind of privatised kind of existences. And I think Mother Teresa said it in the 70s. She said, loneliness is the leprosy of the West. And that's always, I've never quite understood it. But you go, mate.
Well, yeah, I mean, sorry to interject there, but it's as if the pandemic gave us an insight of, hey, let's fast forward the trajectory you're on and what it's going to feel like. And we got a good dose of it. And now we're starting to realize, oh my gosh, do I really want what I think I want? Do I really know what I'm asking for in a way? And so, I think that's one. It's been a warning for a lot of us, and we do see the pendulum kind of swinging back and forth in all of that. But I like what you said earlier about kind of being not built from the university down, but from the gutter up, because it takes. That's where reality lives. It lives actually in the space of where are people at. And I think as important as academia is, as important as research can be, it still does not captivate the reality of what is going on the street level. And we see it in politics. We see it in institutions like the church that actually feel so far separated and distanced from the reality of everyday people's lives that they offer this almost like solution, but it just always seems to miss the mark in one way or another, and we kind of just end up punting. Sorry, I use American references. Spent too much time there, but we punt the problem down. We just kind of delay it to really. Maybe it's a little too awkward. Maybe it makes us a little too uncomfortable to know what's actually happening next door. I mean, the truth of the matter is it's happening in every single one of our lives. We just do a really good job at covering it up. We really do a good job when we show up to our footy club or I don't know, whatever, work on a weekday, and kind of cover up the real issues that are really kind of weighing us down, the really real struggles or addictions or the challenges that are happening in our relationships or the financial problems we've got. And so there's something beautiful. You mentioned Mother Teresa, and I actually wrote her down. I didn't make too many notes, but I've got a few pieces, few names that I just kind of wrote down that kind of came to mind as I was kind of getting ready to chat with you, because this has and will have somewhat of a, where does the intersection of faith come into this with your work in a very kind of faith somewhat faith-based organisation. Well, it is. It's a church. You have the title pastor half the time, though I'm sure you don't like being called pastor or father or any title. But that at that intersection of faith, we've seen people throughout history, Mother Teresa's, we've seen the Desmond Tutus, we've seen the list could go on. Even our current day Pope Francis of the Franciscan Order, who's really resurrected that kind of South American justice kind of element to our faith that have kind of rattled the establishments and institutions and kind of led us back to the core essence of what it means to be human, of to letting our guard down and letting it all out. And I think, and I think that's kind of one of the, I guess, the privileges you have, and people might not see it a privilege. They might look at you and think, oh, geez, you're making such a big sacrifice to serve such vagabonds, such people on the streets. And I can almost guarantee with that kind of statement, you're like, oh, if only you knew how rich my life has become. That being said, you didn't just start working in this work, when you took the job as CEO and pastor in 2018. You've spent I think decades kind of on the coalface in other work, living in communities, living alongside communities. Can you kind of give us a bit of a taste of your journey towards this amazing organisation, which at the end I would really love for people to spend more time looking into, and kind of looking at ways that they could even support. But I'd love to tap into now, like, how you got there. How did you arrive at the Jon Owen that is, sitting in front of me on a screen? Though I wish we were having another meal of that. What was that restaurant you took me to in? Was it Vietnamese?
Yeah, it's called Yellow Corner in Marrickville. So.
Oh God, it was amazing. I just remember, the best breakfast, even though it was still, it was great. It was good. But anyway, so what went into the Jon? What's the journey that you've been on to this point?
Jon's still very much a work in progress. Let me tell you that much. There's he gets a lot more wrong than he gets right. But I'll stop talking about myself in the third person. I think if there's any way to kind of begin to frame some of the journey that I've been on, it would be a quote from Father Richard Raw, who's a wonderful teacher and public speaker who has really deeply formed not only myself but many people who I consider comrades in this work. He said, it's not so much that we are human beings trying to be spiritual. The reality is we're spiritual beings, and our journey is learning how to become human. So that's
let's sink in for a second.
Yeah, it's something that you have to grapple with. On this journey, what does it mean to be a good human being on this planet with all its challenges as it faces people, as it faces communities, but also as it faces the environmental crises that we're seeing will become an ever-present reality now for the subsequent future generations, in a way that you and I only began to hear of, through our youth. So, how can we become more in tune? How can we develop a spirituality that enables me to live more in harmony with myself and with others, with the universe and with the land, and we don't need to pitch forward to learn those lessons. They're all baked in if we look behind, and there's such deep wisdom there. I am, sorry, you're going to jump in?
Did you have, I was going to say, did you have a spiritual upbringing? Like, was that part of your formation from as a child, or is it something you stumbled upon or came across later on in life?
So I'm part of I was born in Malaysia, and my family migrated to Australia when I was very young. So I don't really have any memories of being in Malaysia. we are Indian and Sri Lankan in our heritage. So our migration route kind of follows the British East India Tobacco Company's line. So the old gun, germs and steel kind of way. And so we made it into the Antipodes down here. Isn't that what Australia's called? Into the colonies. And so that's where I grew up.
I guess so.
Completely running roughshod over the Aboriginal peoples of this land. And I've neglected to say I'm here on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.
Yes.
And, I always begin every meeting that we have spending a moment just to acknowledge that and to really pay respects to their elders, past and present. So we were here.
Thank you for doing that.
Thanks, brother. We were here I was in Melbourne. I grew up in Melbourne. And parcel of being a good Southeast Asian immigrant was, we went to church as well. Both mum and dad come from Hindu and Buddhist backgrounds, but both families had conversions to Christianity. And so we attended a little evangelical Chinese church in the inner city of Melbourne. And that was very formative in my upbringing. And it was through the... That's an important part of my story, obviously, but it was also through how I ended up getting to where I was now began very early on when, through growing up looking tangibly different, being dark-skinned in a very white country at that time. It was, I often got to see life from the outside and wonder where my place was in it. And often that came with a lot of very difficult experiences where I was discriminated against, was called a whole bunch of names and was treated different to others. And so I grew up with that as a bit of a lens, and it was quite painful. At times I've got 3 sisters, so I didn't even have a gang that could back me up at the time. And so it was, I used to often say, oh my goodness, why did you come to this country for? We're so different from everyone else. And, Dad would always say, just blend in, son, just blend in. And I'd say, we don't blend with anything except the shadows probably here. And, and when kids would call me a chocolate frog, Mum used to say, just call them a Milky Bar. And for those of you who don't know, chocolate frogs are brown chocolate and Milky Bars are a white chocolate. It didn't work.
Exactly. They call them Freddo frogs these days, and they're definitely a favourite to kind of find when you're travelling, and you probably can't go wrong buying a bag of Freddo frogs for your Aussie that's overseas. But yeah, go on.
Oh, so anyway, I kind of got to uni and went, I hate being vulnerable. So I was 17 at the time, and I said, the way I'm going to never be hurt again or be vulnerable again is I'm going to get into the course that pays the most money, and I'm going to do it and become so rich that I'll never feel pain again. And so as part of that course, they made you do what they called a non-technical subject. And so I just looked through the list and went, oh, there's a theology college in here. I'll do a subject because, the answer to every question is God, Jesus, and the Bible, right? And so I studied this subject that was about justice. And it messed me up completely. And it kind of just changed the trajectory of my life. And I had that moment where I said, I'm about to fish or cut bait with this thing called faith, but if it's real, it better not just be turning up once a week and singing a couple of songs and chucking some coins in the plate. It's got to be something that is a story that is good news for all. And when I say that, I now run a church that our church motto is we're not much like a church, which might suit you if you're not much like a Christian. All right, so we think.
I love that.
It's we're definitely saying that we make it accessible for all, and the cost of our love and our friendship doesn't come at the price of people's souls, And so
the irony is there's a lot of churches that might have like on their their billboard outside or whatever whatever they call those signs that they put words on. I forgot. Probably not a billboard, but they have, all welcome. You see it in every kind of, whether it be you could pick any kind of denomination or that will have that. The funny thing is the minute you walk in, it's like walking into a golf club without your collared shirt. They just stare at you and look at you and like, you're not dressed to play. You're welcome, but as long as you, like your dad said, blend in, as long as you fit in, as long as you, which is really the irony is that fitting in is the opposite to actual belonging. Like, it's kind of not that essence of true welcome, acceptance, and so I love that little kind of bargain you made with the big man upstairs, that hey, I'll get in as long as it doesn't involve all of those kind of caricatures that are actually not caricatures. They're actual, quite often, the reality that most people live in their faith. So,
man. So the vision here is it's love over hate, and so that's essentially saying is how do we stand in between black and white, gay and straight, rich and poor, housed and homeless, cisgendered and non-binary, and how do we stand in such a way and live our lives that love can prevail in that space? And so it's about walking the middle line. And so when we think about human-centered design and we say it's from the gutter up, is we've always got to keep people at the center of that. And we always need to be looking and evaluating how do our systems intersect and how do they create spaces of welcome and safety and space. Our mission is creating community with no us and them. So that means we have to be intentional about working out who are the us and thems. Yeah. Yeah, go Tim.
Well, can you give me an example then where, that kind of challenge, the us and them, the gutter instead of the university model, like where if it was easy to do, a lot of people would be doing, but I tend to find the gravitational pull is actually away from that. How do you be intentional about making sure it's not just because I'm sure that there's well-meaning people, and let's put our own both hands up and say, hey, there's times when we're even well intentional about the way we talk and the way we express our faith that don't match up with the hard work of doing what is we know to be right, rather than just talking about virtue signaling, tokenism. Let's throw a couple of people on our board, or let's do this and that. How do we intentionally? How have you kind of gone about intentionally doing that? I'm sure it's not any profound method, but is there ways in which you've kind of recognized, hey, there's going to be a gravitational pull away from this in my life or in our organization? How do we make sure that we're constantly reevaluating and going back to those core principles?
Yeah, look, we could wax lyrical for how broken our systems are and how our mindset's really already beginning from the wrong space. What can I do for them? Or the way I'm a social worker also by training, and social work kind of sets us up to fail. The 10 scariest words in the English language are I'm a social worker and I'm here to help. But then Bible college also does set up many people to fail. Like, you will have all the answers, and you will learn how to defend this and defend that. And I think just let's throw all that crap out. And there's a quote by the Aboriginal activist Lila Watson, who was speaking at a UN conference on Indigenous rights, and she said, "If you've come to save me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because somehow your liberation is tied up with mine, then come, let us walk together."
Oh, that's so beautiful.
I don't have a monopoly on truth. I don't have a monopoly on how this world works or is meant to work. So I walk into every space saying there is something to learn here. And if we incline our ears towards those who aren't heard, we will hear some of the deepest and truest wisdom that will help us then be able to walk together back to the centre and say, these aren't issues. We're not going to make poverty history until we make poverty personal, until it becomes flesh and blood, brothers and sisters walking together hand in hand. And that's the way we want the new world to happen. And we don't do it we do this by fascination rather than force, because I think people at their core are dissatisfied by the way society is ripping us apart and throwing us into boxes and say the only way we deal with difference is pick up a weapon, and shoot as much as you can at the other side. People come into this space, some of them are terrified for the first time when we have corporate groups coming through here, and yet they realise that there is a common shared humanity in this place, and that brings them back to life. And they realise that their liberation is also tied up with the person who they're sharing a meal with.
This episode is brought to you by the Just Travel Company, your socially responsible travel concierge. Just Travel is the best kept secret in culturally immersive and justice-oriented adventures. Allow Just Travel to take the hassle out of your next trip and experience wonder and unearth justice. Discover the just way to travel today. Simply head on over to just-travel.co to learn more and book your next adventure, like our flagship Israel-Istanbul trip launching out in mid-July 2023. Yeah, I mean, do you know what I love is that it refuses to control the outcome. It refuses to control the other. Like you said before, you're not there to fix people. You're not there to determine the outcome for someone else's life. I mean, I've heard it said that the best way to kind of make peace in this world is to mind your own business, in the sense that not to care about the other, but hey, you've got enough crap in your own life to work through. As that old Jewish rabbi, 2,000 years ago, that Jewish rabbi once said, take care of the plank in your own eye before you go after, searching out for the speck in your brother or sister's eye. And I think that motto you said, so for, one kind of takeaway I just got from you right then, Jon, was, hey, in every interaction I have with anybody, whether it be my children, my wife, at home, whether I walk out the door, see the postman dropping something off, or my neighbours, or person at the dog park, or, the list could go on, What does this person have to teach me? It's what you said before. It's like, this other person, I'm gonna go into this interaction with a sense of curiosity, wonder, fascination, assuming that this person's lived a life and at any moment has probably got so much that I need, rather than the other way around of kind of walking in with maybe an unrealized superiority that I'm out here to help somebody today. The Benedictine tradition, I've heard it said, I don't know how accurate it is, but it's been told to me by some wonderful friends that I believe, and maybe I do need to look it up, but you can fact check me afterwards. But it's good nonetheless, is when someone would come to like the monastery of the Benedictine tradition, this Catholic order, founded by Saint Benedict many hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They would a person passerby, maybe coming on the wayside, would knock on the door, and you could imagine this little latch opening and the little monk hobbling up to the door. They probably were never really little, and they would say, "How can I help you on your way?" And it's this willingness to, I want to serve you because you're my brother, but I'm not trying to figure out how can I serve you on the way I think you should be going, I have an opinion about. It's like, tell me, brother, sister, where do you want to go? And how can I help you on your way? I don't want to control the outcome. This is your life. I'm just here walking alongside you. I'm here to be with you. And, what a horrible life to go through trying to make clones of ourselves, of other people. You got to believe what I believe and think what I think. And I just couldn't think of a more probably miserable way to live life. And yet I know I personally kind of grew up maybe in a tradition and with a lot of encouragement to try and convert, or to try and encourage people to see things the way I see them, and to say the words that they need to say in order to, to find the freedom that I think they need. Anyways, I could go on, but I just love the way you kind of. I love the way you kind of summed it up with this, with every interaction. This is where the rubber meets the road. What does this person have to teach me?
And, if we can get it out, our natural impulse in Western society is to fix people, and that immediately creates a situation where we can't be in community and relationship with each other outside of a professional clinical space. And that's not what we were designed to be here for. Yes, there are professional relationships. We all should be going to therapy, I reckon. But, there's a time and a place for that, right? There's a time and a place for that. And, there are these encounters, and we miss so much wisdom. We miss so much truth when we're too busy trying to impose our view of what is right or wrong upon the world, or fix it. We say everyone has a right to make any decision they want, even a bad one. So often I'm sitting there with people who I absolutely deeply love and adore, and I say to them, I wish you could see what I see, right? Sometimes the greatest contribution we can make into a relationship is our grief and our sadness. I say, I wish you could see the potential I see. I wish you could see the spark of life. When you are in that place, the story that you tell yourself about yourself is not true. There's a different story there. But if you want to continue to make those decisions, I'm not going to stop you, brother, or sister, or person. I will give you the greatest funeral ever, and I will weep as your body is carried out. But I just wish you would see. And that's a very disarming space, because we're so, want to try and grab and rescue and fix, but that becomes manipulative. And all of a sudden I've predetermined what is right or wrong, which is exactly the kind of thing I'm trying to work against. Yeah.
It's hard because you're a father. You've got, one of the things I enjoyed so much when we first met is the way you just launched into talking about your family. And I think your daughter was sitting some really important exams, and how much of a priority she was to you at that moment. You needed to be somewhere for her, and just that seemed to just ooze out as an important part of your life. But you've welcomed people into your family, and that it just, whether they're part of your biological family or extended family or the community, you could just tell. And so there's, in those relationships where we're taught to actually craft and carve and help raise and form a child, there does become that point where that, okay, this is the direction, this is the life that I hope for you, but I'm going to have to let you go on that journey yourself. I mean, it's kind of a challenge, challenge when you're in that space and you're living in that world. I mean, I don't know about you, but to kind of realize that I can't, nor should I try to change somebody, but I can provide the fertile soil in which growth can take place. I can love, and I think people grow and change and evolve into the best person of themselves when they feel loved and accepted. I think it's pretty simple. And so how do you kind of throw family into the mix? How do you do that in your family? How do you take your family along for the ride? I mean, I know that the 20 years you spent living in intentional community with a previous organisation kind of forced you and your family to kind of, not be sheltered from that journey that you have personally taken as well.
Yeah, look, it's been quite a journey, and we've made probably more mistakes than we've got things right. But at the very least, our family and our children know that our values are something we deeply live out, not something we stick up on a wall and print out and laminate. This is something that's flesh and blood. So they know if they want to follow in this path, they know the costs as well as the joys of it all. But they've all got experiences with family that are very much along the lines of a big brown family. They're just everywhere they go, they know people. But that there's always a tension in raising your own kids, and I'd say do as I say, not as I do. But when the founder of this place christened about 30,000 people, and he christened them all into the family of humanity. And I did 2 on the weekend, and one of the parts of the ceremony is I anoint their head with oil, and I say to the parents, we save oil for anointing historically for royalty, and then remind every parent there that you don't own this child. This child is not your possession, right? They're on loan to you for just a brief moment of time. Mm-hmm. And so it's your job to nurture and tend to that gift and that responsibility that you have. And, children don't come into this world as formless balls of clay that you're to mold into shape. They actually come with gifts and skills. And, there's a beautiful book by a guy called Parker Palmer, who's an American educator and it's called Let Your Life Speak. And it's one of my favourite books because it's less than 100 pages and they're the greatest books ever in the world. And he's got a couple of other books, The Courage to Teach. But he is from the Quaker tradition. And, he says we waste so much of our lives saying, who do I want to be? And then we pull the posters up on the wall, and that might be a rock star. But for those of us committed to social justice, we'll put Martin Luther King or Gandhi or, Rosa
William
Parks up on a wall.
Wilberforce.
And we're trying to force ourselves to be something we're not, when actually the greatest thing we can do is go back and look at the breadcrumbs of the life of who we are. And he kind of guides us through that to say, actually, this is my unique contribution, because a need doesn't constitute a call, right? I think we do have that. We owe it to the world to be able to give them the gift of who we are, because when we do that, we actually give permission for others to discover their own gifts and to be who they're made to be, not some unattainable image. And we laugh at Instagram and all that kind of rubbish. But, I think many of us committed to social justice are playing the same game with a different set of clothes on, or actually more clothes on. And if we just gave ourselves the permission to say, when I sit still, when I take notes on my own soul, what is it in this world that I'm not free to not do? And that takes a bit of work, but I think it ultimately makes us better humans and better members of our families and our communities.
Jon, I didn't expect to be so personally challenged. And that goes to show the still journey I have to go into walking that true that true life of service. What you just shared there went straight to my heart. I think we do try to live into other people's shoes, or what society is trying to. We try to figure out what does society want from me, or what does the game require of me? The game of social media, the game of the career ladder, the game of whatever it is, and then kind of mold as much to we try and, I think deep down we know who we are and when we're free, right? Who was it? Who was it that said? I think it was the Dalai Lama who said, "Who went around and says, he was a Buddhist that told people not to become a Buddhist. He says, you don't want to be a Buddhist, you want to be free. You don't need to become a Christian, you need to be free. You don't need to become a Muslim, you need to be free." And we know what it is deep down when we're free. And I think personally that feels like to me when I know I belong, just as I am, like that core sense of like, I don't have to fit in. I'm here, I'm me, and that's okay. Whether the game says or the golf club says you have to kind of act, look, live a certain way. And so, yeah, I think for a lot of us listening, and even just me right now, is where am I playing the game? Like, where am I kind of
Really good.
still kind of thinking about, that there is that there's a expectations I need to meet today that I've put on myself or society has put on me. So thanks for coming up with that. I mean, what?
We've kind of, we're talking about justice and faith and this, but also the need for more justice in our world, because God knows that this world is tearing itself apart rapidly and destroying itself, and there are real needs out there. I don't want us to ever not talk about that. But I guess what I'm saying is, where does that issue from within our own hearts and our own lives is really important. I think it's best summed up with Carl Jung was once teaching a bunch of students a lesson, and they were studying the book Pilgrim's Progress, which is a strange book. Don't read it. And but they asked him, "What's your Pilgrim's? What's been your Pilgrim's Progress?" And Carl Jung, now an old, shriveled man at the end of his life, just said to them, "This has been my Pilgrim's Progress, to climb down the 10,000 ladders of who I thought I was supposed to be, and finally to go down into the dirt and to extend the hand of friendship with the lump of clay that I am." Right? I think if we can stop climbing up the ladders of who we think we're supposed to be and climb down those 10,000 ladders and extend the hand of friendship and care and compassion to the lump of dirt, the temporal form of ourselves that we are meant to be, it is from that ground that we will be able to make a tangible difference to the needs of our world.
You've made me reminded me of Father Richard Rohr, who you referenced earlier in his book, Falling Upward. In that kind of, I don't know if you've read that particular book, but it kind of refers to the two phases of life. This life of trying to build and define who I am and what it is in the container and put all the pieces, and then suddenly the second half of life. And I think we can, for those of us listening, we can beat ourselves up for having played the game of having kind of, gone to the top of that heap and realized, heck, I need to find, what this whole life is all about. I actually need to start walking back down. It's almost like
Carl Jung uses the climbing down metaphor, whereas there's nothing. The first half of life, like we don't, and because we live in a culture that's devoid of rituals. Basically, what do we do when you turn 18? You get pissed. Right, and then if in Australia your dad takes you to visit a sex worker or something, and all of a sudden that's the only ritual you've got. And we're seeing, because of these lack of rituals, we have guys in their late 40s, early 50s still in their adolescence. And what we find is that we have different phases in life. You've got me monologuing now, sorry. And so we have our householder phase where we're building. I love this, yes. We're building those ladders, the stages of our lives. And it's not wrong to build that tower. It's not wrong to get that job, to have a family, to get established, to have somewhere to live, to provide for your family. The point of building up those ladders, and Carl Jung talks about climbing down them, but Richard Rohr says the point of it is to jump off and leap into that second half of life. And so, look, don't get down on yourself, because the goal of traditional cultures isn't the goal of our culture. The goal of our culture is anti-wisdom. It's to be 21 forever, right? And that's just an unattainable standard that leads to so much pain and suffering. But the goal of wisdom cultures is to become the wise elder in your tribe. And so how do we continue to realize that's the high watermark and live out lives that actually show that that is a value of ours, by hanging out with the elders and asking them their perspective on life and society, but also realizing your life doesn't end at 21 or 30 or when your kids leave home. There's always another phase that we've got to engage in. And so we need a total rework of the way our society works. So, we could have talked about, Wayside
And
still runs amazing programs, but I think we need a revolution of the
yeah,
heart to really kick this thing off, right?
well, yes, and it's like, as Richard Raw would say, like, transcend and include. We can't just throw out the old. We have to somehow find a way to include it and transcend it. And so,
Absolutely.
I think for people listening, this is, there's probably some of you thinking, oh, that there's that gut feeling. For me, I,
Mm,
I always feel it when it's the surf's pumping and I'm about to
mm,
jump off the rocks at Burley
mm,
Heads,
mm.
and I know I'm gonna be okay, but it's still scary to be on the edge
Yeah.
of these rocks, and I could slip, and I could time it wrong, and a set could come and wash me on those rocks. But I know I have to jump. Now I've got to jump. I've got to, everything in me's, and it's usually at that last moment, at when you have to jump, that everything in you is kind of pulling you back.
Mm,
And so there's probably people listening that are thinking, oh, that means I've got to jump. And for some, it's, we talk about the great resignation. It doesn't mean quitting your job. Usually that kind of, that kind of just pure external jump, you find you bring yourself with you to that next
mm,
thing if it's purely just an external decision, and you still have to just, that old Tim is still with you, but it's that willingness to be like, okay, um I need to, to make some really internal checks, and do
mm,
some heart soul searching and thinking, and you're right, because if you don't do that, like you said, you could jump in and volunteer at Wayside. There are many amazing programs. You could visit them, but if you don't have the intentions right, if the why isn't there, if you if you haven't done the work, and chances are, even if you do go and volunteer and serve and expose yourself, you'll quickly learn where your intentions are. And it might be an even faster way to actually getting those
mm,
things sorted out. So again, no right or wrong way or order to do anything,
mm.
but it does begin inside, right? It begins in there, and kind of moves its way out. Mate, you've got so much on your plate at this time of the year. I could only imagine, as we were talking before we started recording, this is a tough time of year where conversations come up. It's a time of
Mm,
year where people feel left out. We're talking about, Christmas, the holidays, and all that seems to happen. And I think it's important, that obviously we want to remember what all these things mean to us at this time of the year, but also that, I was just having a business lunch with somebody, and he's Jewish, and I said, again, it just escaped from me that I'm like, oh, have a great Christmas break, and he's like, oh yeah, I will, but I won't be. I'll still be doing what I'm doing. And any advice for people out there at this time of year that, again, even if this doesn't get released at Christmas, but
mm,
any advice for just people as they just kind of interact with people? How do you kind of stay that place of, being aware of where other people are at,
mm.
and how to kind of, yeah, meet them there?
I think one of the greatest lessons we can learn in life is how to love the real rather than the ideal, right? And that goes for us in our friendships and our
Mm,
relationships, and our with our families and everyone around us. There's also that moment where we have festivals like Christmas, where we are bombarded
mm,
with what it means to have the ideal Christmas, and we can get so caught up in trying to provide that and running around to get the toy of the season or the right dressings and the right
mm,
spread, and we completely lose the plot and lose the point of what it's all about. And if we can just take the moment just to realize the greatest gift we can give is that of our presence and our attention and our focus.
mm,
Chuck that phone away for a couple of days, particularly coming up to Christmas Day, and just be with the people that you love, because these are the places where we know who we are and whose we are as we gather. and share that food together. And, that's ultimately the goal, right, is that we can all just sit down together and share a feed. I think that's, one day when this world is the place that it's meant to be, is we all just sit down and have a good old yarn, and we all continue to learn and grow and address everyone's challenges that arises. So try and do that. Try and make, if I give any advice, and I really try not to give advice all the time, is just to say, just take a moment, just take a moment to breathe in and look around and realise what an immense gift being alive is, and what beauty that can unleash into the world.
Well, what an immense gift this conversation has been to me. I mean, this has been so much fun. Just getting to know you even a little bit more, hearing you talk about your own journey. I can't wait for us to have another real chat. Definitely, if you ever find yourself up here, mate, I'd love to treat you to some of our local cuisine too. But thanks for making the time. Thanks for your heart, and all the best with your work. If there's ways, I'm sure people might want to reach out to you, Jon. They might want to personally touch base with you and grab a coffee, or maybe they want to visit the work and volunteer or serve, or if they're looking for a place to kind of, I know, have meaningful impact with their resources. I can vouch for that personally, and the work that you do. Where would they go? Could you kind of we'll have it in show notes and stuff, but if people are listening and want to kind of reach out.
Oh, look, if you want to reach me, there's Facebook, Jon Owen, Jon, so no H in there, and just chuck in Wayside Chapel. And if you want to find the work of the Wayside, just type in, careful, there's a Wayside Chapel in Texas as well. I believe we got our name from the founder. Yeah. The founder completely ripped off the name from Texas because he thought that's a cool name. Just put Jon Owen, Wayside Chapel and Sydney, Australia, and you'll be quickly led to our website. And so come on down, come in for a yarn anytime. Drop me a line.
Yeah. So good. Well, thanks, Jon. Get back to your family, to your work today, and have an absolutely ripper of a day, mate. Hope it's the best one yet, and really appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your friendship. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much, Tim. And as you head into the 25th of December, mate, you get some good time with your tribe too, brother.
Thanks so much. Thanks for making it to the end of another episode of Justice Matters with Tim Buxton. It is an immense privilege to share these conversations and inspiring people with you. To learn more about how you can get involved or learn more about today's guest, head on over to the show notes or episode description. This podcast was produced by the master himself, Jose Villotto, with just a little bit of help from me. The featured music is the song Turning Over Tables by The Brilliance. Lastly, to my Patreon community out there, thank you so much for your support and generosity. Without you, this podcast would not be possible. If you'd like to become a Patreon and get exclusive access to behind-the-scenes content, visit patreon.com/Justice Matters and start your Give What You Can monthly contribution today, and join me and so many others in creating a world where everyone belongs. Until next time, thank you for subscribing and sharing this podcast with your friends. Justice Matters with Tim Buxton acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation, now known as Australia, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.